Kids make mud pies out of it. Dogs dig holes in it. Rich people bathe in it. Builders move it. Ants make hills out of it. Scientists analyze it. Road workers flatten it. Grandparents garden it. Pigs wallow in it. And all of us live off it one way or another. What is it? You guessed it. Dirt. Jesus, the God-man, actually walked around on this planet at one point in history. He told simple stories to the crowds that followed him. He talked a lot about seeds, but he also talked a lot about what seeds need to grow in. Dirt. What a topic to try and hold a crowd's attention with. What comes to your mind when you hear the word dirt? Well, sure, it's something seeds need to grow in, but dirt can stand for other things too. For instance, dirt can represent something that has very little value. Can you think of anything more lowly, more common than dirt? It's under everybody's feet. It gets walked all over. Dirt's one thing that's looked down on by everybody. For example, if something's not worth much at all, we say that it's dirt cheap. Or, if someone has hardly anything to live on, we might say that they're dirt poor. But dirt can represent something else too. Dirt can be something that causes trouble, that really messes things up. Jesus used all three of these ways of looking at dirt to get his points across to the crowds who followed him. He talked about the kind of dirt you plant seeds in. He'd surprise people by not looking down on even the lowliest things, like dirt. He must have thought that there was something to be learned way down here at the bottom of things. He also talked about a kind of dirtiness that can mess things up more than anything else in the universe. Let's look at each of these kinds of dirt. We'll start with the kind of dirt that you plant things in. Soil. What is it anyway? Let's ask a scientist. I wanted to ask you a few questions about dirt from a scientific perspective.
Soil is a very complex material, and in many people's vocabulary, dirt is anything that makes a mess. But the components of that soil, mineral matter, organic matter, air, and water, make up those elements that is very complex. And when the living organisms, the microorganisms and insects in the soil, and the plants interact, then we get the complex material that really is soil. Up to the time that we get that interaction, you're probably right in calling it dirt.
So, with just the right combination of things, dirt, as soil, becomes something that's very valuable. It's where our food comes from.
That precious 4 to 6% of the Earth's crust is what sustains all life on Earth. It provides food, it supplies food for animals, it recycles the air in the environment.
Anything and everything will grow in dirt if you let it. A woods is a good example. Anything will grow here that gets enough light, dirt, and water. But if you want to control what grows in the dirt, you've got to clear a space. A little space is called a garden. A big one's a field. Once you've got a cleared space, you can cultivate it. And then you can put fertilizer in the field to give the soil more nutrients. Once the field is ready, you can plant anything you want. Once Jesus told the story about a field that was ready to be planted. Listen. There was once a man who went out to sow. In his sowing, some of the seed fell by the roadside, and the birds swooped down and gobbled them up. Some fell on stony patches where they had very little soil. They sprang up quickly in the shallow soil, but when the sun came up, they were scorched by the heat and withered away because they had no roots. Some seeds fell among thorn bushes, and the thorns grew up and choked the life out of them, and they bore no crop. But some fell on good soil and produced a crop, some 100 times what had been sown, some 60, and some 30 times. The man, woman, and child who has ears should listen. This is one of the simple stories that Jesus told the crowds that followed him. Pretty simple, isn't it? More like an observation than a story. Well, this really bothered the sophisticated skeptics who came around to trap him in his words. How could they? There weren't that many of them. Jesus' words were simple and short. What if we had been there that day? What would you and I have heard? The first thing that strikes me is that he's talking about dirt, different types of soil. The seeds that landed on the nice cultivated soil survived, and the seeds that didn't. It's important to remember that many, if not most of the people listening to Jesus worked the land. They were farmers. Nowadays, in a big city or at a mall in the suburbs, it seems you have to walk for miles before you can spot a little patch of earth, and even then it's in a flower pot. But this wasn't true for the people back then listening to Jesus' story. No, they dealt with dirt in one form or another every day of their lives. Let's take a closer look at the different types of soil in Jesus' story. Remember that first, there were the seeds that fell by the roadside. Not a great place for a seed to land. Now, a road on a farm isn't paved or anything, but it's still used for traffic. People's feet, animals' hooves, big heavy wheels crush the tiny seeds. But maybe it was a back road where the traffic wasn't so bad. Well, I'm afraid that wouldn't matter because road dirt is as hard as a rock. I mean, if this shovel can hardly make a dent, how could a tender root from a sprouting seed? And then there's another problem out here on the open road. There's no place to hide. Jesus said that the birds swooped down and gobbled up the seed. The road dirt might just as well have been a dinner plate. The seeds that land on the side of the road don't get anywhere at all. Well, what about the second type of soil in Jesus' story, the rocky dirt? This type offers a lot more hope than the road does. It says that some seeds fell on stony patches where things start out just fine. The seeds get tucked away into the nooks and crannies. The birds can't find them without really looking. And when it rains, little puddles form. The seeds have all the water they could possibly need, so they sprout quickly. But then, the rain stops, and the sun comes out, and the rocks get hot, and the water evaporates, disappears completely. There's no cool, moist soil to sink their roots into, so the little shoots shrivel up and bake. Although they got off to a great start, they can't last very long. What about the third kind of ground? Well, at least this looks like dirt. Well, sure, it may be way off in the corner of the field, but it's rich and black. Nothing hard-packed or rocky here. No hooves or feet trampling around. The seeds nestle into nice, loose, loamy soil. This seems ideal. Well, so what if a few unfamiliar shoots sprout up nearby? There's room enough for everybody. Once again, things start out just fine. But these other shoots grow faster. Overnight, they start getting real long and gangly. They creep over to the good shoots, just getting started, and lean all over them, wrapping themselves around tighter and tighter. Their leaves are broad like beach umbrellas. They create an awful lot of shade. They climb the good plants as if they're ladders to the sunlight, and their roots grow all over the place. It's hard for the good plants to get a root in edgewise. They get strangled up above and crowded out down below. But then, there's a fourth kind of soil in Jesus' story. The field itself, which the farmer has plowed and weeded and fertilized, and maybe even protected with a scarecrow. These seeds have it the best of all, and depending on a few factors, are able to produce a decent crop. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but they are able to accomplish exactly what they were planted for in the first place. Well, that's the story. But what does it mean? That's what his close friends wanted to know. Fortunately, Jesus said he would explain it. The man who sows the message of the kingdom. Well, the man must be Jesus himself, and the seeds are his words about the kingdom. What kingdom? Well, Jesus was always talking about his Father's kingdom. You know in the Lord's Prayer, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." It was the place that Jesus said he was from. But he also really wanted you and me and everybody to join him there. But how do we human beings find this kingdom of heaven? Do we have to go on a treasure hunt? Well, like I said, you'll find the best clues in Jesus' stories. Because, you know, no one's sure exactly where it is. It may be up in the stars somewhere, but it may be in a different dimension altogether. I don't know. But the interesting thing is that Jesus said he brought the kingdom with him. So apparently it's portable. He could carry it around with him. Now, the good thing about that is we don't have to go very far to get it. Well, except in our guts. We have to somehow get to the place where we take Jesus at his word, where we believe what he said is true. Jesus' words, just like seeds, fall on different types of ground. Well, the ground must represent the ears and brains and hearts of the people listening. Anyone in the crowd with halfway decent hearing is catching what Jesus is saying, but apparently different things happen to the words once they get inside of different people. Jesus goes on explaining, when a person hears the message of God and does not grasp it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was planted in their heart and mind. This is like the seed sown by the roadside. So, the road dirt represents those of us who hear it but don't get it. We're either not interested or distracted. The words can't really get in anywhere. They go in one ear and out the other. To make matters worse, Jesus says that the birds stand for the devil, who comes and snatches away what's trying to take root before it even has a chance. Let's see what Jesus had to say about the second type. The seed sown on the stony patches represents people who hear the message and eagerly accept it, but it has not taken root in them and does not last long. The moment trouble or persecution arises through the message, they give up their faith at once. Not much different are the listeners represented by the rocky dirt. Oh, they receive the message of the kingdom right away, but the effect of the words can't develop any lasting root. Oh, they sprout for a while, but then something goes wrong. Things get rocky, you could say. A friend calls them weird. Another accuses them of being a goody-goody. Trouble comes at them because of the kingdom words trying to take root within them. They can't take the pressures or they toss the whole thing. The effect of the words completely shrivels up. Let's see what Jesus had to say about the third type. The seed sown among the weeds represents the person who hears the message, and then the worries of this life and the illusions of wealth choke it to death, and so it produces no crop in their life. Let's look at the third kind of dirt, the weedy soil. This represents those of us who receive the kingdom message okay, and things go along fine for a while, but we want other things, and we want them bad, like that promotion to vice president, a new skateboard, tan legs, the latest model microwave, lots of friends, bundles of money. Becoming rich or powerful or famous becomes the most important thing to us. We get all clogged up with ambitions and cravings, and these creep in and choke out the life of what we've heard, so we can't produce a single thing. Sure, we might be luxurious green, but there isn't any fruit. Let's see what Jesus said about the fourth type. But the seed sown on good soil is like the person who both hears and understands the message. Their life shows a good crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was planted. Did you ever think about that? A farmer plants one tiny kernel of corn, for example, and after a while a huge stalk comes up with several ears of corn on it, and each of them with several hundred kernels. The words sink way down into people's minds and hearts. They take root. The effect of the words grows strong and tall and bears an incredible harvest that can be gathered up and fed to lots of other people. Do you remember how Jesus ended the story? He said, "The man, woman, and child who has ears should hear." What do you hear? What do I hear? Anything sprouting yet? Well, that's one story that Jesus told about dirt. But he told another one that might have something to do with dirt too. It's a lot shorter, and he didn't take the time to explain it. At least we have nothing written down. Listen to it. See what you hear. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure a man discovered in a field. In his joy, he sold everything he owned to get enough money to buy the field and get the treasure too. This story compares the kingdom of heaven to finding a treasure buried in a field. There he goes again, bringing up the subject of dirt. I mean, that's probably where you'd find something buried, don't you think? I wonder why he didn't say like a treasure long forgotten in a vault somewhere, or in somebody's palace, or in a gold mine. Nope, Jesus chooses the plain old common ground in a field, the same thing that everybody's feet is standing on. Presidents, preschoolers, Pennsylvanians, Pakistani, Norwegians, Koreans, Nigerians, the rich, the poor. I wonder if he was trying to make the point that the kingdom is within everybody's reach. Not just churchgoers, the well-adjusted, successful people, but plain old ordinary folk. The nearsighted, poor readers, late sleepers, everybody. This kingdom has a way of catching people off guard. Notice how it's not just sitting out there in the open, but it's hidden, buried underneath. You can't just casually glance and say, "Oh, there's the kingdom of heaven over there," like it's some sort of fast food place or tourist attraction. No, the story says that finding this kingdom is more like going on a treasure hunt. Who knows, maybe hundreds of people had walked by the field, not far from the treasure, and they didn't even give the plot of ground a second thought. Apparently, this kingdom surprises people. It's not instantly recognizable, like a billboard. It doesn't look like anyone's idea of what a kingdom's supposed to look like. You know, with gold and thrones and castles and things. Well, not yet at least. Now, I don't know what the guy in the story was doing, snooping around somebody else's property in the first place, but that's how some people do it. They start on the sly. They get wind of this kingdom and get curious. They start snooping around, maybe even in a church. And before they know it, it all starts making sense to them. I don't know. Maybe there wasn't a fence. Maybe there weren't any clearly posted no trespassing signs. Maybe it didn't immediately dawn on him that the field belonged to somebody. Maybe it was all overgrown like a vacant lot. Anyway, there he goes, ambling through the field. His mind probably on 20 different things, or maybe on nothing at all, when suddenly he stumbles on it. Smack in the middle of the field. This guy catches a glimpse. Boy, did he ever. There it was, suddenly shimmering just below the surface. Now, the story just says that he stumbled on a treasure in the field. We don't know exactly what he saw, but both you and I know that a treasure is something that's extremely valuable, very precious. Likewise, I suppose, the kingdom of heaven is very precious, priceless, unaffordable for any amount of money. Now, different people consider different things to be treasures. What would you feel lucky enough to find buried in a field? A pack of baseball cards? A shiny new car? A beautiful doll? What if I had stumbled on the kingdom of heaven buried in a field? Would I recognize it? Would it be something that would strike me as having any value whatsoever? The story says that whatever this guy saw, he got the point. So, what does he do? Slip it into his jacket and take the treasure home? No, he doesn't touch it at all. In fact, he buries it again. He hides it in the dirt. Strange. And zips back home, kicking up his heels for joy. What do you think made him so happy? Jesus said in another place, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Now, this doesn't mean that his heart was buried in the field too. No, his heart was still in his body like it's supposed to be, pumping blood, or he could never have dashed back to the car like that. No, when Jesus uses the word heart, he means the place inside of each of us where we care for things deeply. Like I said, maybe another person wouldn't have seen a thing, or if they did, they wouldn't have recognized it or even cared about it. Lots of people walk by empty fields every day and don't see a thing. But this guy loved what he stumbled on. He was thrilled. It made him jump for joy. He found the owner, asked the price, counted his pennies, and came up short. But that didn't stop him. He sold everything he had just to buy the field. Well, that's what the story says he does. The entire field. Well, that's exactly what happens when this kingdom of heaven gets into somebody's life. It enriches the whole thing. To this guy, the whole field became precious because of the treasure that was hidden inside it. Maybe that's why Jesus chose just a plain, old, ordinary field to bury the treasure in, because if this kingdom could make something as lowly and plain as a plot of ground into something so valuable, just think what it can do to a person, any person, who really hears the words. One day, Jesus demonstrated this in public. He and the crowds following him came upon this blind beggar on one of their walks. Now, he had healed blind people before this. He'd just speak a word or comment on their faith or touch their eyes, and zap, their sight would return. But this day, he did something very different, amazing. I guess he wanted to show just how far his power to transform something can reach. It had to do with dirt again, and spit. That's right, saliva. I mean, how low could he go? But I guess he wanted to make a point. I mean, as if the dirt on the bottom of our feet isn't enough, he had to add spit to it. It says that Jesus spat on the ground, in the dirt. Then he bent down and mushed the spit and dirt into a kind of mud. And if that's not strange enough, Jesus takes this wet dirt and smears it on the beggar's eye. But Jesus doesn't just leave the beggar there with mud on his face. He tells him to go and wash it off in some public water fountain or swimming pool. Go and wash in the pool of Siloam, Jesus says. And the beggar did exactly that. Well, he could have just stomped off angry and humiliated, I suppose, but he didn't. I guess he figured he had nothing to lose. And plus, on top of that, there was an authority and a kindness in the stranger's voice, the likes of which he had never heard before. And so he took Jesus at his word, and he went to the pool of Siloam, and he washed off. And you know what? After he washed it off, he could see perfectly. And that's what he does to the low-down, despised parts of ourselves. You know, the things we feel so ashamed about, so sick over and hopeless about. He takes them and he transforms them into something that is so beautiful, something we could never have dreamed up ourselves in a million years. Let's look at the third type of dirt that Jesus talks about. The dictionary says that dirt's any foul or filthy substance, such as mud, dust, grime. Jesus has something to say about this type too. He talked about stains that are inside of us. One day, some people were looking to start an argument with him. They had caught some of his close friends gobbling down their lunch without first washing their hands. Well, now that's kind of gross. But Jesus took the opportunity to talk about a far, far worse kind of dirtiness. Listen, he said, it's not what goes into a person's mouth that makes them dirty, but it's what comes out of their mouths that makes them dirty. Whatever goes in passes into the stomach and then out of the body altogether. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from their heart and mind. It's these that really make a person unclean. For it's from your minds that evil thoughts arise. Murder, adultery, lust, stealing, and slander. These are the things that make someone unclean, not eating without washing your hands properly. Wow. You've heard about ring around the collar? Well, apparently we all have these massive, grimy rings around our hearts, minds, souls, and spirits. A similar thing happened another time. One night, Jesus was invited to have dinner with this very religious man. Listen to what happened. So Jesus went into his house and sat down at the table. The Pharisee, well, that's what they used to call people who were very religious. The Pharisee noticed with some surprise that Jesus did not wash before the meal. But the Lord said to him, "You Pharisees are fond of cleaning the outside of your cups and dishes, but inside yourselves you are full of greed and wickedness. Have you no sense? Don't you realize that the one who made the outside is the maker of the inside as well?" Well, that's quite a picture. Can you imagine just washing the outside of your dishes? Can you imagine making sure that the backs of your plates are all shiny and clean and then drying them off? And then stacking them back on the kitchen shelf? Well, in no time at all, things would start smelling pretty bad. And just think what would happen the next morning when you reached for a bowl to have your cereal in. Well, apparently our lives are something like this. We do so much work on the outsides, but we're powerless to reach the insides. Oh, I'm sure having a religion is helpful, but going to church is not enough to get rid of the greed and wickedness, the dirt inside my heart. Remember what Jesus said to the religious man. Don't you realize that the one who made the outside is the maker of the inside as well? So I guess he's the only one who can help. He's our only hope. Do you believe it? Do I believe it? Do I believe that there's someone who made me, my insides and my outsides, who knows me far, far better than I know myself? Someone who can wipe out the sin and the wickedness inside, clean me up once and for all, my thoughts, my feelings, my heart, my mind, my whole being, like no soap or bleach in the whole universe ever could. Someone who knows the huge crop that's possible, that can grow in my life, if his words can only land in some good soil. This happens by believing, by accepting as absolutely true that Jesus can do it. Dirt, what a topic to hold a crowd's attention with. But Jesus sure could do it.